April 17, 1961. Invasion fallout. The Bay of Pigs invasion was a failed military operation conducted by Cuban exiles trained and financed by the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Approximately 1,400 anti-Castro Cuban exiles landed at Playa Chirón on the southern coast of Cuba with the objective of overthrowing the communist government led by Fidel Castro. The invasion was authorized by U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1960 and continued under the administration of President John F. Kennedy, who took office in January 1961. The plan originated as a covert operation aimed at supporting an internal uprising against Castro. The U.S. government believed that a combination of airstrikes and a ground invasion would inspire the Cuban population and military to turn against Castro's regime. The invasion force, known as Brigade 2506, consisted of Cuban refugees who had fled the country following the 1959 Cuban Revolution. The training took place in Guatemala and Nicaragua under U.S. supervision. On April 15, 2 days before the ground assault, American B-26 bombers, painted to look like Cuban aircraft, conducted bombing raids on Cuban airfields to disable Castro's air force. However, the bombing was only partially successful. Most of the Cuban Air Force remained operational. President Kennedy then canceled a second wave of airstrikes, concerned about public exposure and international backlash. This decision critically weakened the invasion's chances of success. When the exiles landed on April 17th, they faced immediate resistance from Cuban armed forces. The invasion force was quickly surrounded, and the Cuban military, under the direct command of Fidel Castro, repelled the attack. The lack of U.S. air support and the strong resistance prevented the brigade from gaining a foothold. By April 19th, the majority of the invasion force had either been killed or captured. Over 100 exiles were killed, and more than 1,100 were taken prisoner. The Bay of Pigs invasion had significant political and diplomatic consequences. It severely damaged the credibility of the Kennedy administration and embarrassed the United States on the global stage. It also strengthened Castro's position in Cuba and further aligned the Cuban government with the Soviet Union. In December 1962, the prisoners were released in exchange for $53 million in food and medical supplies, arranged by private negotiation. The invasion also contributed to heightened Cold War tensions. It was a precursor to the Cuban Missile Crisis of October 1962, when the Soviet Union deployed nuclear missiles to Cuba. The failure of the Bay of Pigs led the Kennedy administration to reevaluate U.S. policy toward Latin America and covert operations, resulting in the creation of the Special Group for Counterinsurgency and the establishment of the U.S. Agency for International Development to promote stability through economic aid. The Bay of Pigs remains a landmark event in U.S.-Cuban relations and a defining moment in Cold War history. It demonstrated the risks of covert military actions and the complexities of foreign intervention during a period of global ideological conflict. For enthusiasts of historical ephemera, visit history-collectors.com to find collectibles that might complement your collection. You can own a piece of history.